My daughter declared me mentally unfit at the bank, then looked me in the eye. "That's your final value, you old hag." I won't lie, the dinner last night hurt me more than I expected. We were preparing for my granddaughter Abby's 12th birthday, and the room held more tension than balloons and candles. I had insisted on paying for her gift the special edition Anne of Green Gables she'd been dreaming of, because I still believe in giving when you love. But Peter, my son-in-law, scoffed across the table. "Just pay for it, Mom. We've covered the cake, decorations. The hall, your only value now is to hand over money and sit still." Then he leaned in and said it loud enough. "That's your final value, you old hag." My heart stopped. I couldn't move. I didn't respond. I just rose and went to my room, my confidence shaken. I lay awake half the night, wondering how the man I welcomed into my home had lost all respect for the mother of his wife. My daughter Angela sat quietly beside him, not joining in the insult, but not stopping it either. I kept replaying those words, not because I lacked self-respect, but because those words revealed something I had long suspected. They believed I'd already become invisible. So early this morning I pulled on my cardigan, took my old flat shoes, grabbed my little black leather purse, and drove to the bank, the same little branch on Belmont Avenue that my husband Charles and I had used since before Abby was born. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. I reminded myself to keep my voice calm. When I stepped into the bank lobby, I hoped only to withdraw the money for Abby's gift. That was all I intended. The parking lot was oddly empty. I told myself the quiet was nothing. At the teller window, I waited my turn, watching the light reflect off the polished marble floor. Then I heard a soft voice behind the glass. "Lucille Simmons, account number 421109, diagnosis of cognitive impairment. We recommend guardianship review." I froze. My name. My life described like I was already gone. Peter was there. Angela was there. Papers were on the counter. They did not see me yet. My fingers tightened around the purse strap. My heels clicked deliberately on the marble. I stood before them and said, "Good morning." My voice steady. I still remember my granddaughter's birthday, and I am still alive and sharp enough to remember the people who erased my name from their hearts. Peter's face went white. Angela gasped. The bank manager, startled, held out the large folder. "This belongs to you, ma'am." I took it without replying. They had assumed I would never notice, but I always had. I left the bank without rushing. I didn't drive home immediately. I parked 3 blocks away to gather my thoughts. I watched strangers pass by, mothers pushing strollers, couples holding coffee cups. My knuckles were white, though I wasn't gripping the wheel. I let the wind brush my face. The quiet settled. At 10:42 a.m. It was too early to call it a bad day, but there was no pretending it would stay normal. When I pulled into the driveway, the hydrangeas drooped by the porch and a bird sang in the yard. The world didn't pause for me, but I did. I closed the front door, placed that heavy folder on the kitchen table. Inside were documents I had never signed, medical statements I had never seen, declarations stamped and notarized claiming I lacked capacity to manage my affairs. They hadn't asked me. They made decisions in rooms I wasn't invited to sit in. They made decisions as though I'd already vanished. I didn't cry. My hands trembled just once. That was enough. I heard Kathy from the service door. Abby's little voice came next. My daughter Angela walked in, smiling as though nothing had changed. There it was, the innocence in her step, until her eyes landed on the folder. Her smile hesitation cracked. She asked softly, "Mom, where did you get that?" I answered by placing the folder on the table. I did not look at Peter or at Angela. I just said, "I know what you did. I saw every signature you forged." She tried to explain. "Mom, we were just preparing. In case you forgot. In case something happened," I interrupted. "In case?" I asked. "You filed paperwork saying I already did." Silence. I suppose the part that hurts most is that they think I forgot everything, not just where I put my keys, but everything that ever mattered. I remember the first time Angela told me she wanted to be an actress. She was 15. She had seen a streetcar named Desire at the community college and came home breathless, reenacting entire scenes in our living room in a nightgown and my old heels. She wasn't bad. She was even raw. Her voice cracked in the right places. Her face held something real. But I had grown up around actresses, real ones, the kind who drank tap water for dinner and waited tables in cities that swallowed them whole. I didn't want that for her. So I told her the truth. It's a hard life, Angela. It doesn't always reward talent. You're good. But it's not about good. It's about money, connections, and luck, she cried. She called me a dream killer. I said I was a mother. I wasn't there to inflate her with delusion. I was there to build a net below her fall. She went into teaching instead, at first. Literature. She was great at it. The students loved her. But it wasn't Broadway. And that ache never left her, just grew bitter over time, like a wound that crusted over instead of healing. Years later, when she quit teaching altogether, she told people she'd left to pursue creative writing, but she never wrote a single play or even a journal. She just stayed home, managed the house, told people she was helping raise Abby. When she looked at me, she didn't see the woman who held her through fevers and fight. She saw the one who told her she couldn't be someone else. In her mind, I had stolen the fantasy, so she rewrote me into the villain. I let it pass. I thought time would clear it. I believed she'd see that I was never cruel, just scared for her. But resentment doesn't dissolve. It roots. Peter didn't help. When they first married, he was polite, not warm, but performative. Opened doors, called me Mom, even brought me flowers one Mother's Day. I never trusted him fully. He always seemed to need an audience. And the first time his business got into tax trouble, this was 6 years ago, I was the one who co-signed the loan that bailed him out. I took out part of my retirement early to cover the penalties. He cried at my kitchen table and called me an angel. That was the last time he looked at me like a person. Ever since then, I became a burden. Not explicitly, but in the way he'd sigh when I walked into a room, the way he'd correct me mid-story at dinners, like I was always slightly off, slightly too slow, slightly in the way. Angela started mimicking him. When I'd forget to close a cabinet or repeat a fact, she'd look at him, smirk, and say, "Mom's having one of her loops again." They didn't know I heard. I always heard. Angela once told me I was lucky to have them, that most parents end up alone. I smiled, but the words lodged like a splinter. Lucky? I had paid their mortgage for 2 years after Peter lost his job. I had watched Abby every afternoon when Angela was too tired to parent, and somehow I had become the one in their way. I still remember the worst of it. It was last Thanksgiving. I had made the turkey, the pies, the stuffing from Charles's old recipe. Angela invited over Peter's clients, people I didn't know. I asked if I could say grace. She hesitated, then said, "Maybe keep it short, Mom. Not everyone here's into the God stuff." I said 3 sentences. 3. At dessert, Peter stood up and made a toast to chosen family. He looked right at me and said, "Some people think biology gives them a seat at the table, but loyalty's what keeps it." Angela laughed. She didn't look at me once that night, not even when I quietly went to bed before coffee. And still, I stayed. I thought, this is family. They're tired. They're stressed. It will pass. Then came the justification. After I confronted Angela with the bank documents, after she realized I knew about the guardianship papers and the medical declarations, she started with the performance. She poured tea she didn't drink. She used her softest voice. "Mom, you've just been off lately. You asked me where Abby's school wast twice." I looked at her dead on. That was 2 years ago, because she moved schools. She blinked. "Still, Peter and I we wanted to make sure nothing would happen, that if you lost your memory, we'd be ready." I held up the folder. "This isn't ready. This is already. "These say I'm gone, Angela." She said nothing. Then, "It's not about that. It's about protecting you." "No," I said. "It's about protecting my assets from me." She looked at the floor. That was her answer. What broke me wasn't the betrayal, it was how reasonable she tried to make it sound. As though forging a medical power of attorney without telling me was just planning ahead. As though reducing me to a set of documents was a form of love. I stared at her and saw the 15-year-old again. Not on stage, not in costume, but hiding her hurt behind defiance. Still blaming me for the life she didn't have, even after I'd given her the one she did. Angela didn't just want to take care of me. She wanted to take control, to erase the parts of me that no longer served her version of the story. And Peter? He just wanted me silent and profitable. I sat alone that night, reading every page of that folder. They'd submitted evaluations from a memory screening I took last year, routine 1. I had passed. They had highlighted the one moment I paused too long. One hesitation turned into a diagnosis. I was not senile, I was not incompetent, but in their eyes, I had become inconvenient. And now, I was done waiting for them to admit it. I was done making space in my own home for people who planned to bury me legally before I was dead. They thought they could reduce my life to a checkbox, a signature, a paragraph. But I remember everything. And I was going to make sure they did too. It did not happen all at once. That is the cruelest part of it. The erasure came slowly, like rust on the hinges of a door. One day it swings a little less smoothly, then it groans. Then one day, it doesn't open at all. The first sign was small. A letter from the clinic never arrived. It was a routine follow-up. I called the office to check the date, and the nurse on the other end said, "Oh, that was emailed to your medical proxy." "My what?" I asked, already feeling the room tilt. "The contact listed Angela Simmons?" She replied, reading the name like it was settled law. I hung up without arguing. I didn't want to start a war over an email. Not yet. I thought it might have been a mistake, a checkbox Angela ticked while helping with my online accounts. But then I missed an eye appointment because it had been rescheduled again, without me knowing. When I called to complain, the receptionist said gently, "Your daughter canceled it last week. She said you were too tired." Too tired. No one had asked me. I had walked 2 miles just the day before. I started keeping a notebook. I did not cry. I did not panic. I recorded. Dates, times, phrases. I logged every call I never made, every appointment I missed, every moment someone made a choice for me without asking. Then came the dinners. They used to ask me to say grace, or at least pass the bowl first. Now, there was a quiet choreography I was not part of. Angela would scoop the potatoes. Peter would cut the roast. Abby would set the napkins. I was given a plate at the end already filled, already placed at what they had started calling Grandma's little spot near the sliding door. It was closest to the kitchen, farthest from conversation. I told myself I was imagining it, until one evening I pulled out a chair at the head of the tablea spot I had sat in for decades. Angela looked up and said, gently but firmly, "Mom, that's where Peter's laptop goes. Can you sit at your usual place?" I looked at her, holding the chair, and said nothing. Peter never looked up. Then came Abby. Sweet, blunt, honest Abby. She had always come to me after school, reading her books while I knit, telling me about her classes. One afternoon, she didn't come in. I found her in the living room with headphones on. "Sweetheart," I said, "why don't you come sit with me like we used to?" She looked up, smiling, and said, "Mom said I shouldn't. She said you forget things now." I sat down in the hallway after that, between the kitchen and the den. I wrote it down in my notebook. I wrote it word for word. Angela and Peter never told me they were replacing me. They didn't have to. They just kept shrinking my space, one drawer at a time, one dinner at a time, one conversation at a time. The medicine cabinet in the upstairs bathroom, the one I used, was suddenly empty. My blood pressure pills were now in the kitchen for easier access. Angela began handing me my daily dosage already sorted in a box. "No need to fumble with labels," she said. But I liked reading the labels. I liked knowing what I was taking. I always had. When I asked her where she kept the rest, She said she'd locked them away just in case. In case of what? I asked. In case you get confused. I did not scream. I did not throw anything. I walked upstairs, closed my bedroom door, and added it to the list. At the grocery store, I reached for a jar of marmalade me husband's favorite. Angela whispered, "You know that's full of sugar, right? Not the best for your age." She took it from the cart when she thought I wasn't looking. I bought a second jar the next day and hid it in my closet. It became a game. What freedoms could they take without making me complain? What would I let slide in the name of peace? They treated me like a shadow, something present, but without mass, without voice. One night, I caught Peter on the phone in the study. He didn't see me in the hall. His voice was low, but clear. "Yeah, she's mostly harmless. We're managing it. Just tying up the legal ends so nothing slips through. The bank already flagged one account for confusion, makes our case easier." He was talking about me, like I was a folder. That night, I stayed up until 3 a.m., copying everything in the folder from the bank. I made notes on each page. I left yellow, sticky tabs on every inconsistency. I wrote a letter to my attorney, Donald sealed it, and hid it behind the old family Bible in the linen closet. I wasn't preparing for a war. I was confirming it had already begun. Peter once joked at a dinner party that aging parents are like unpaid interns, useful until they get opinions. Everyone laughed. I laughed too. I even clinked my glass. But I didn't forget it. I remembered it when Angela corrected my pronunciation in front of her friends. I remembered it when Peter told Abby, "Bother Grandma later, she's napping." I remembered it when my calendar disappeared from the fridge and Angela said, "We've moved everything digital, it's easier." They were building a reality where I didn't exist. But I did. I existed in every page of my notebook, in every bank transaction I'd printed, in every voice memo I'd begun recording on my phone just in case. They thought I was fading, but I was documenting. Every erasure, every exclusion, every time they handed me silence and called it love. I placed the folder on the kitchen table like it was just another letter from the mailbox. Nothing in me shook, not my fingers, not my breath. The words inside had already landed. Now they were just ink on paper, and I had grown used to reading betrayal between the lines. I set the kettle on the stove, just as I always did at 3:15 p.m. The water would whistle in 8 minutes. Angela would walk through the door in 5. And right on time, I heard the soft click of her heels. She came in holding a reusable grocery bag, humming something light. She didn't see the folder at first. "Hey, Mom," she called, not looking up. "Did you need anything else from?" Then she stopped. Her eyes caught the folder on the table, half open, the bank's letterhead clearly visible. I turned from the stove and met her eyes. I didn't smile. She blinked. Once, twice. Her mouth opened, then shut. Then finally, she asked, "Where did you get that?" I sat down at the table, slowly, deliberately. Then, I looked straight at her and said, "You really thought I wouldn't find out?" Angela dropped the bag on the floor. "Mom? You thought I wouldn't notice?" I said, tilting my head slightly. The appointments that disappeared, the mail I stopped getting, the chairs I stopped being allowed to sit in. You thought I'd just keep fading, didn't you? Angela reached for the folder, and I laid my hand gently over it. "Don't. Not today." She didn't try again. She started. "I didn't think you'd," her voice faltered. "I didn't think you'd notice." There it was, the truth she hadn't meant to say. It landed heavier than anything in that folder. I leaned back. "You didn't think I'd notice. Not that I wouldn't care. Not that it wasn't wrong. Just that I wouldn't notice." I let the silence fill the room. It didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Angela sat down across from me, her hands trembling in her lap. "Mom, we were just," Peter thought. "It's been stressful. We weren't trying to hurt you." I looked at her, really looked. "Do you remember when you dropped out of that early childhood education program?" Her eyes flicked up, confused. "Yes." "Do you remember what I said?" She didn't answer. I said it for her. I said, "Come home, rest, figure out your next step. I didn't call you a failure. I didn't say you disappointed me." Angela's eyes welled. But you, I continued, you called me a burden. You called me a liability. You signed papers saying I was no longer myself, and you didn't even tell me. She whispered. I was scared. Of what? That I'd forget my address? That I'd repeat a story twice? No, she said, that you'd get hurt, that I wouldn't be able to take care of you. No, I said, sharper now. You were scared I'd say no, scared I'd resist. So you did it in silence. You replaced conversation with control. Angela's lip quivered. Peter said it was safer this way. Peter said, I repeated coldly. Peter doesn't know the name of my first pet. He doesn't know where your father proposed to me. He doesn't know a damn thing about what I remember. I know you, Mom. Then you knew I would find out, and you did it anyway. She wiped her cheek. I thought it was the only way. If something happened, then you would have power over everything I spent my life building, I interrupted. Not support, power. That's the part you won't say out loud. Angela buried her face in her hands. I waited. Then I said, quieter now. You looked me in the eye and smiled, while signing away my voice. You sat at this table, drinking tea I brewed, telling me about Abby's school days, while you filed documents saying I wouldn't remember them. Angela looked up, mascara smudged. What do you want me to say? That it was wrong, I said. Not a misunderstanding, not a mistake, not stress. It was wrong, and it was cruel. She didn't speak. That was answer enough. The kettle whistled behind me. I didn't move to silence it. I have given you everything, I said over the sound. My time, my money, my trust. I never wanted repayment. I only wanted to be seen, respected. But you decided that was too much. Angela reached out. I didn't mean to. I know what you meant, I said, pulling the folder to my chest. You meant to get away with it. She sat back, defeated. I don't know how to fix this. I stood slowly. You don't. Not today, but I do. And with that, I left her at the table, the whistle still ringing in the background. The next morning, I pulled an old address book from the second drawer of my desk behind tax folders, Christmas cards from decades ago, and the photo of Charles holding Angela as a baby. I flipped to the D tab. Donald Henley, attorney, retired, trusted. Charles had used Donald for our estate planning, will, and the purchase of our home. Donald had once said to me, if anything ever goes sideways, Lucille, you call me before you call your priest. I hadn't spoken to him in nearly 6 years, but the number was still there. And I still had one thing left they never saw coming. Time. He answered on the second ring. Donald Henley. Donald, it's Lucille Simmons. I need your help. There was a pause. Then the voice softened. Lucille, I haven't heard from you since Charles passed. You all right? No, I said, but I will be. I met him at his home office that afternoon. His wife brought us iced tea. He had gone mostly gray and walked with a limp, but when he looked over the documents, I saw the old fire flicker in his eyes. Guardianship based on a one-time screening, signed without consent, backed by a doctor who never met you more than twice? He looked up. They were planning this for a while. I have proof, I said, and reached into my purse. Audio recordings, from the last 4 months, from my hearing aid. Donald blinked. You were recording? I figured if they were going to treat me like I wasn't in the room, I may as well act the part and start collecting receipts. I handed him a flash drive and a printed transcript. He read silently, his brow furrowed deeper as he reached the section labeled Dinner, October 12. It included Peter mocking my senior moments, Angela saying, let's just have her sign while she's in a good mood. Call it insurance paperwork. Peter making a phone call, pretending to be me to reschedule a memory evaluation. Then the kicker, the phrase I had etched into my spine. That's your final value, you old hag. Donald put down the papers. Lucille, you could press charges. I'm not there yet, I said, but I want everything frozen, everything they touched. He nodded. Accounts? All of them. I want them reviewed for unauthorized access. Medical? I want a full report on who submitted what, and when, and a written revocation of every proxy they tried to establish. He was already writing. And your assets? I pulled out another sheet from my bag. List of all properties, joint holdings, trust, anything they had temporary authority over. If they transferred a dime, I want it traced. He tapped his pen twice. You're not angry, are you? No, I said. I'm methodical. He smiled. Charles always said you were sharper than him. Charles also trusted Peter. He'd be disgusted. We filed the revocation paperwork that same day. Donald called in a favor from a former clerk at the courthouse who still owed him a debt from '92. I never asked why. The petition to invalidate guardianship proceedings was submitted under emergency review. By sunset, my financial accounts were locked to external access. All automatic transfers to Peter's consulting business were suspended. Every shared utility was flagged. I drove home not with vengeance, but clarity. I had been written off as frail, but it was my stillness that let me observe. While they were busy arranging the furniture for my absence, I had been mapping their intentions. Now, they would feel what it meant to underestimate a woman who once ran a household, raised a child, buried a husband, and still remembered every number, name, and lie told behind her back. Angela and Peter thought they were being clever, but they forgot the first rule of power. Never corner the quiet ones. I cooked roast chicken the way Charles liked it, stuffed with lemon and garlic. No shortcuts. I even set the table with the good china, the kind Angela said was too formal for family dinners now. One last time, I thought. One last meal before the foundation cracked open beneath their feet. At 6:30 sharp, they walked in. Peter first, jacket slung over his shoulder, lips pursed, Angela behind him, holding her phone like a shield. Neither of them had the sense to notice the silence in the air, the kind that waits with a smirk. Dinner? Peter asked, eyebrows raised. Not quite, I said, motioning for them to sit. They hesitated, then took their usual seats. I remained standing. From my purse, I pulled a manila folder and laid it on the table. Inside was a single page, clean, crisp, stamped with authority. Angela glanced at it. Her face went pale. Peter leaned in and read aloud, Notice of emergency asset freeze, executed under the authority of counsel, pending legal investigation. He looked up. What is this? An end, I said calmly. Peter stood up, red blotching across his neck. You have no idea what you're doing. These accounts are tied to my business, our bills. I know exactly what I'm doing, I said. That's a copy. He snatched the paper, began to tear it in half. I reached into my purse and pulled out another folder thicker, heavier, and tapped it. That one's the original, already in my lawyer's hands. Rip as many copies as you like. Peter's jaw locked. Angela touched his arm. Peter, sit. He did, reluctantly. I sat across from them and folded my hands. I know what you did, I said. All of it. The forged signatures, the false calls, the guardianship filings. I have recordings, dates, names. And now I have a lawyer who's not afraid to push back. Angela stared down. Her voice cracked. We were just trying to be prepared. No, I said, my voice low, sharp. You weren't preparing. You were waiting. Mom, you were waiting for me to stumble, to forget something meaningful, to repeat myself just once too often. You were counting the steps until you could declare me unfit and take the rest of the walk without me. Peter muttered. That's dramatic. No, I snapped. Dramatic is standing in a bank with fake paperwork declaring me mentally gone while I was alive enough to pay your rent. Angela whispered. We didn't mean to hurt you. You meant to erase me, I said. She started to cry. Real tears this time, not manipulation panic. Peter folded his arms. So what now? You throw us out? I don't throw people out, I said. They remove themselves. I stood and walked to the counter. I returned with a second envelope. This, I said, is a 30-day notice. At the end of the month, you'll be out of this house. Angela gasped. You can't be serious. I'm deadly serious, I said. You lived here rent-free. I paid for groceries, water, taxes. You used that time not to care for me, but to quietly make arrangements for my legal extinction. Where are we supposed to go? Angela whispered. Somewhere that doesn't require betraying someone to pay the light bill. Peter leaned forward. You're punishing your daughter because of me? No, I said, with steel in my tone. I'm holding you both accountable. She married you, she signed with you, she stayed silent beside you. Angela looked like a woman unraveling. Abby, what about Abby? Where is she supposed to sleep? I reached into my bag and pulled out a final envelope. This is a trust, established in Abby's name, independent of you. She is 12 and not responsible for your sins, but she will remember what they cost. Angela sobbed, covering her face. Peter stared in disbelief. You think this makes you a hero? No, I replied. It makes me free. They sat frozen. I picked up the plates, untouched. I used to pray I wouldn't be a burden, I said softly. I didn't realize the real burden was giving my life to people who counted the days until I was no longer in the way. Angela looked up, eyes swollen. I didn't want this. I just didn't know what to do. We're drowning. It felt easier to prepare for your absence than face our failures. I nodded once. That's the first honest thing you've said in months. She cried harder. Peter stood. You'll regret this. I turned slowly. No. I regret not doing it sooner. I left the dining room and didn't look back. The roast went cold, but I felt warm for the first time in years. The silence after they left was heavy at first, like the kind that settles after thunder, but it wasn't loneliness. It was peace. I could hear the fridge hum again. The floorboards creaked without eavesdroppers. My thoughts, once drowned out by whispers and suspicions, were finally audible. The house breathed again. 3 weeks after they moved out, I got a call from Donald. They're feeling it, he said flatly. Peter had been fired. His firm discovered the medical paperwork he'd tampered with, claiming to represent my cognitive status. He had submitted them as evidence of character when applying for a larger account. A standard audit revealed the dates, signatures, and inconsistencies, one of which included a recording, courtesy of my hearing aid, where he practiced faking my voice. Angela didn't fare better. A civil case had been filed. The guardianship filing they submitted without notifying me was invalidated by the court retroactively. But the damage was already done, and the records showed intent. She was permanently barred from acting as guardian for any individual, including her own mother. The bank initiated an internal review. Fraudulent activity, unauthorized signature use. It was more than embarrassing, it was public, and that mattered more to Angela than jail ever could. I didn't call them. I didn't gloat. I didn't even say, I told you so. The world did it for me. Then, one afternoon, I found a letter tucked under the front door. The envelope was small, the handwriting unmistakably Abby's. I opened it in the kitchen, standing barefoot by the sink. Inside was one page, pencil written, a little smudged. Dear Mom, I love you. I still do. But Grandma was the one who always told me, don't sign anything you haven't read 3 times. And you forgot that. I hope you're okay, but I can't pretend nothing happened. I'm staying with Grandma this weekend. Please don't be mad. Love, Abby. I folded the letter slowly, pressed it to my chest. Then I cried, not for anger, not for pain, but for the small flicker of hope that still lived in that little girl. That Friday evening, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, Abby stood there with her backpack, clutching a stuffed rabbit I thought she'd forgotten about years ago. She didn't speak. She just fell into my arms and began to cry. I'm sorry, Grandma, she whispered. I didn't know what they were doing. I knelt beside her, held her face in my hands. You don't have to apologize, I said. You're the reason I fought back. She sniffled, wiping her nose. I won't be like them. I kissed her forehead. I know. We made cocoa that night. She sat at the head of the table. I let her pour the milk and stir the pot. She asked questions about the war, about Charles, about the house. I told her the truth. I showed her the notebook where I'd written every moment they thought I didn't notice. She read it slowly, then looked up and said, You're the bravest person I know. No medals, No judge's gavel. Just that sentence. And that was enough. I could have stayed. I could have kept the house, polished its floors, repainted the porch, waited for the silence to feel like home again. But I didn't want to live in a place where every wall had heard betrayal whispered behind my back. A place where love had been measured in signatures, not hugs. Where I was worth less than my own kitchen table. So I packed. One suitcase, a few books. A framed photo of Abby last night. She stayed with me, smiling over Coco and my hearing aid, which had recorded the sentence that changed everything. That's your final value, you old hag. They thought it was a curse. It turned out to be a key. I didn't go to a nursing home. I didn't need anyone to schedule my meals or tuck me into bed. I found a community homino where people were sent to wait out the end, but where people chose to begin again. A small center on the edge of town, with a squeaky screen door and ivy climbing up one side. They had music every Thursday from an old radio, books traded without due dates, and nobody called you Room 3, Bed B. They called you by your name, and they listened when you spoke. I didn't come because I was lonely. I came because I was finally free to choose what kind of life I wanted to finish. No property taxes, no passwords to hide, no drawers to lock just to feel safe. I made tea. I played dominoes. I taught them how to bake ginger cookies soft in the middle. I reread Anne of Green Gables to a woman who could still quote it word for word. We cried at the same line every time. It's not what the world holds for you, it's what you bring to it. 1 week after I moved in, the center director asked if I'd be willing to lead a group. Something simple, she said. We call it Memory Circle. We just share stories. I agreed. Every Thursday after dinner, we'd sit in a circle of squeaky chairs. Some used walkers, others had hands too shaky to hold their teacups, but when I spoke, they listened. I didn't talk about Angela, or Peter, or what they took. But one evening, during a quiet lull, a woman with clouded eyes asked gently, "How did you forgive the ones who made you feel worthless?" I paused. The room hushed. Then I said, "I didn't forgive them for their peace. I forgave them so I could sleep." The others nodded. No one clapped. No one needed to. That night, I opened the window in my room. The wind rolled across the roof like it always had, but this time it didn't chill me. It carried no secrets, no threats. Just air, just freedom. I left the door to my room unlocked that night. Not because I forgot, not because I'm careless, but because, for the first time in years, I knew no one here wanted to steal my voice, and no one ever would again. 3 months after I moved to the little community home, Abby came to visit on a Sunday that smelled like cinnamon and old pages. Her school backpack thumped against the bench as she sat beside me under the elm tree outside the sunlit window that faced the garden. I wrapped a blanket around my lap, even though the air was just cool, not cold enough to make me tremble. I liked the ritual. She didn't say much at first, just slid off her shoes, tucked her feet beneath her, and leaned toward me. In her hand was the scarf she'd knitted, a pastel mix of pink and lavender, stitched unevenly in parts. "I made this for you," she said softly. "It isn't perfect." I touched the yarn. "Neither am I," I said. "That doesn't stop me from staying warm." She smiled, and we sat like that for a few minutes, sharing the quiet. Then she pulled something else out of her backpack, a folded letter, the kind with crinkled corners. She looked up at me with big brown eyes and said, "I found this in Mom's drawer. She wrote it, but she didn't send it." My heart paused. I recognized the handwriting. Angela's. "Mom, I don't know if you'll read this. Maybe I don't deserve for you to. But I remember now the night you sewed my dress after I ruined the first one for prom. I remember your hands shaking when Dad didn't come home on time. I remember the way you made toast when I was sick, not because it cured me, but because I liked the smell. I thought getting ahead meant not needing anyone. But all I did was turn love into leverage. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted to say, I see it now. And I am so sorry. Angela." I read it quietly, closed my eyes briefly, then looked at Abby. "She's trying," I said. Abby tilted her head. "Mom says I'm a lot like you." "That's good," I told her, taking her hand. That means you'll survive. Abby sniffled. I won't change, Grandma, I promise. Then she offered the scarf. You'll wear this when we read the book together? Of course, I said. Every Thursday. In that moment, I thought about how she had always come. Always. Even when my phone call to her was middle of night, because I couldn't sleep. Even when she helped me find an appointment I didn't make, or sat quietly by my side when I stared blankly at the television and she asked nothing. She came because she saw. She stayed because she chose. It's okay to ask for help, I told her later, as we walked through the garden and the light dipped golden. But you don't have to fix everything. Just be there. She nodded. I know. I learned from you. I looked at the center's housewarming sign, Camellia Place, where every story matters. I realized how right that was. Even after all the mess, even after the betrayal, here I was telling Abby a story that mattered hers, mine, ours. We entered the bubblegum pink door and went upstairs to the memory circle room, where each Thursday I shared a little of my life. Today, I told them about a winter's night decades ago when Charles and I danced in the foyer because we shouldn't have waited. I told them about the lunch I made for Abby when she was 5 and refused peas. I told them about the moment I walked into the bank lobby and heard my own name described as though I was gone. Not gone, just moving forward. After the session, Abby lingered. She asked me, Grandma, do you ever feel alone now? I took her hands. Not with you here. She looked down, swallowed. Mom said, she's proud I'm staying with you more, but she said I shouldn't come too often. I raised an eyebrow. Why's that? She says it might confuse you. My heart broke, not for me, but for her. The bright, honest girl stuck between worlds. I squeezed her hand. You coming is the best thing anyone could do. Later that night, we shared cocoa in my little room. I had the window cracked open, so the night air drifted in. The ivy on the wall outside rattled softly. She recounted events at school, her dislike of algebra, her excitement about the art project, her friend whose dog ran away. I listened and asked questions. I didn't know much about algebra, but I knew how to listen. When she talked about her mother, her tone changed. Quiet, hesitant. Mom said she made mistakes, she said. She said she didn't mean to hurt you. I set down my mug. What did you say? Abby didn't meet my eyes. I told her. She said she was scared. But then I realized, that's not a good reason. You're right. Mom says she wants to build something new, but I think it starts with saying sorry, the way you taught me. Open, clear, no excuses. I nodded. Then maybe she's beginning. We sat a little while longer. Then she climbed into the twin bed next to mine, those beds everyone said would be too narrow but always felt right, and pulled her rabbit against her chest. I tucked the blanket up to her chin. She looked at me with that small, serious face of hers and said, Grandma, I promise I'll be like you. Not the ones who counted, but the ones who care. Tears pressed behind my lids. I held her. You already are. The next morning, I found a drawing on the small wooden nightstand. It showed me, the two of us, reading books under the tree. At the bottom, in Abby's handwriting, Grandma's voice matters. I placed it on the windowsill where the light would hit it each dawn. In the weeks that followed, Abby visited every Thursday just when I led Memory Circle. We had a routine. She brought the cocoa. I chose the book. We laughed when I mispronounced word after word. She corrected me gently. We laughed. We shared silence too, because silence between us wasn't emptiness, it was connection. On some days, I'd notice the way Angela called Les to ask me to do something. On other days, Peter's name would pop up in a legal notice or headline, but I didn't dwell there. My focus was Abby, and through her, the future. She told me once, Mom said she'd like to see you happy again. I clasped her hand. I am, because I chose me. I call. I pained. As I closed the front door each night, I heard the elm leaves whisper. Not gossip, not betrayal, just wind. And I realized I had traded the rotting roots of their silence for the fertile soil of my own voice. And I slept with the door unlocked, not because I forgot, but because I no longer feared someone stealing what remained of me, because I knew I had already given them more than they deserved, and still kept enough for myself. Thank you for listening to Lucille's story, not just with your ears, but with your heart. Some people think strength is loud, but real strength? It's quiet. It remembers. It chooses peace, even after war. Lucille didn't shout. She didn't slam doors. She simply stood up, claimed her truth, and walked into the next chapter with her head high. If her story moved you, if you felt the justice, the heartbreak, the quiet revenge, don't forget to subscribe to Grandma True Stories. Here, we remember the voices they tried to silence. We honor the women who endured in silence and finally chose to speak. Every story is real. Every memory is a lesson. So hit that subscribe button and join us on this journey through the untold and unforgettable. Thank you for being here. Keep listening, because revenge has no expiration date. And when a grandma speaks, the world finally listens.